Hello and welcome to Coconut Chats, everyone. Today you've got me, Harita, and I'm joined with Chris. How are you going, Chris?
Hey, I'm doing well, thanks. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Today we've got a very special guest all the way from the other side of the world in the UK. Raj Holness is a domestic abuse and sexual violence survivor. Her abusers, unfortunately, were her own parents when she was much younger. It got to the point where they tried to marry her off when she was only 18 years old. But instead of continuing to live in fear, she turned from a fearful victim to a fearless survivor. She now uses her story to help fight for domestic abuse survivors. She is the winner of multiple awards, including the West Midlands Woman of the Year in 2015, the Community Champion Asian Business Award in 2016, and many more. Hi, Raj, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm really good, thanks. It's such a pleasure to finally be able to talk to you. Um, I know we've been trying to tee this interview up for a while, but with 3 different time zones and work and everything, we finally got there, which is great. um, so I guess we'll get started. It's quite a heavy topic, but something that we really need to talk about. Research suggests that, so I come from New Zealand, obviously. So research suggests that 1 in 3 New Zealand women have experienced physical or sexual intimate partner violence in their lifetime. But it was a little bit harder for me to actually find facts about family violence. So, coming from siblings or parents or people you would count immediate family. But what I did find was that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 6 men in their lifetime go through some form of domestic abuse. So it could be verbal, mental, but most of the time physical from somebody in your household. And this leads to, on average, 2 women being murdered each week and 30 men per year. But that fact I found was actually more the partner doing it rather than parents. And 16% of all violent crimes come from domestic violence. And this was from the Crime in England and Wales website. So it's still violent crimes that are least likely to be reported to the police because of the stigma and the shame associated behind it. But unfortunately, because it doesn't get reported, it ends up having more repeat victims because the abuser gets away with it so many times before something is actually done about it. And another interesting fact I found was that it's one of the single most quoted reasons for people becoming homeless, because they try to escape the house that they're being abused in, and then they have nowhere to go. So this is all quite sad, especially, in this day and age in the 21st century. But your book and your website talk about you being a survivor of abuse by the very people you are meant to feel safe with, your parents. And it came in a few different types of forms. So verbal, physical, and then later sexual, since you were 5 years old. So can you tell us and our listeners why this even happened to you?
It's a very good question. And it wasn't just my parents. Actually, the sexual abuse at 7 started with a cousin of mine. And they were a close family. We all did everything together. And that was my mum's side of the family. So everything that we did was instigated by them. So it was, again, especially in Indian culture, we're taught to respect our elders, and I suppose they were the hierarchy of our home and our family. So everything that I went through, or we went through, as in our immediate household, was always impacted by grandmother and uncles. So therefore, hence the sexual abuse of my cousin, because he actually used to live with us initially. So even then we were taught, you don't talk about anything, and who's going to believe you anyway? So when the sexual abuse initially started, who do you talk to? How do you even say what's going on? So you learn to play this silent game, and plus it's shameful. Nobody talks about abuse. Nobody talks about, and let alone sexual abuse and incest, because those are severely taboo topics. You know, you're shunned if you do and you're shunned if you don't. So I think it's getting to that point where we have to be able to have these conversations openly and talk about the rights and the wrongs. And it's not targeting a religion, but actually targeting old traditions and cultures that have been so embedded that it's become the norm, that a girl can be touched and nothing said, that a girl can be beaten and nothing said. So for my aspect, that's what was happening. Was I was starting to be sexually abused initially, to then be verbally and physically and financially abused. And again, even though my parents were the ones that were following through with everything, it was initiated by external family members. And I suppose that's how the whole family was entwined. Again, if anything happened, it was like a family meeting, not with immediate family, parents and siblings. It would be parents, uncles, grandmother, aunts, maybe some of the older cousins. So everything was entwined, and it was so unhealthy that, again, you couldn't speak up because you daren't. There was consequences if you even tried to them answer back. But actually what you're trying to do is speak up to what's been happening and what's taking place, that it's resulting in you trying to end your life. But it was the norm. So it's sad statistics. And again, as high as the numbers seem, I don't feel like it's true to form. I feel like actually it's happening a lot more and a lot more frequently than we know and understand. And that's the sad reality that I think we're living in this day and age.
Raj, what you mentioned is very painful. Like, I've read your story as well, but I have two things to ask you. You've mentioned traditions, and you've also mentioned inner family child abuse, right? So when inner family child abuse happens, or in your case, when you were being subjected and it was a cousin of yours, what role does a parent do? Like, what role did your mother do? Was she aware of this was happening to you? This is my first question. And the other is, I know I should not be putting in faith here, but if I have to put in religion and faith, because a lot of us Indians are obsessed with religion, right? Do you really feel that religion has a role in kind of shaping up our mindset about how a girl needs to be treated or how a boy needs to be treated? Because I see this dichotomy, right? On the day, a girl is being literally worshipped for our Navratras. If our listeners are not aware, Navratra is a 9-day festival in which we basically worship the girl and the goddess. So you're worshipping the girl child, and then we have you, where you're literally being abused. So do you think our faith plays a role in kind of having all these horrible mindsets in the family?
Okay, so your first question was about my mom and whether she knew. I don't believe at the time she did.
Right.
Because the way that our family was, we used to have family businesses. So we'd have a shop, and then we lived above the shop, but there was no access internally. So you'd have to come out the shop to go up the stairs to go into the house upstairs. So what would happen is she'd be running the shop. We'd come from school. I'd get there before they would. And then he would come running home. And then that's where the incident would happen before my eldest sister got home. And they were both on the same age. So it would always be looked at like I'm messing about, where even though he's come home and he stripped me, and I'm literally there, because again, he's threatened. If you say anything, mom and dad said that they're going to tell you off, or you're going to get into trouble, or you're going to get beaten. And by then, that was happening regularly. So you're going to believe what's being told, because at that point you have no reason to question whether what he's saying is going to come true or not. So unfortunately at the time, no. And I think, would I have shared? I wouldn't have known how to, because how do you say he's sexually abusing me at the age of 7 and he's a lot older than me? And plus there was this fear factor of he's going to beat me, let alone it's not just like I said, mom and dad. I have to think of the fact that grandmother's going to come, uncles are going to come, the oldest cousins are going to come. So I'm going to get passed around and beaten quite severely for saying something that isn't going to be true, as far as they're concerned. So I think hence the silence gets so entwined with our upbringing, because we're afraid of who's going to believe us. And even if we say something and they believe us, what's going to get done about it? As for religion, it's not, when we look at every religion, no religion, I believe, in their foundation is taught to beat and reject a female. I don't believe any is. So therefore, you can't put it down to religion. You have to put it back down to culture and how we've been taught. As much as girls, like you just said, have been, you know, you have a festival that's where girls are worshipped, but in the same breath, girls are being drowned.
Right.
Girls are killed. So there's a huge contradiction there with regards to, okay, in one breath we're worshipping them, in one breath we're celebrating them, and then in the breath when we find out that a girl's been born, we're sighing, we're trying to shun that and keep that quiet, and okay, let's not celebrate that as much. And that's unfortunate, because I believe that happens a lot, especially within the Asian community. That I don't think there's a religion within the Indian community where that doesn't happen, where girls are celebrated. We have those few and far between parents that are absolutely fantastic and will celebrate male or female and don't care who they get as long as the baby's healthy. But unfortunately, that's a few in number in comparison to the daunting reality that we're in. Even in this day and age, girls are frowned upon. We celebrate boys. Oh my gosh, if we can have boys every time, that would be brilliant. And it's a girl, oh, okay, then we won't hand the Indian sweets out. We won't celebrate. We won't phone everybody and say, oh, congratulations, it's a girl. We'll just keep that quiet, and out the quietness, they'll find out it's a girl. And I think that, you know, if we don't start teaching our children from here, they're going to keep following through, because generation after generation, as much as nobody's sitting down and saying, we don't like girls, we don't want them, we don't celebrate them, it's a learnt behavior. We do what we see. So if we're growing up and we're seeing our family dishonor and discredit females, then it's an automatic unspoken behavior that when we grow up, we're doing the exact same thing. When as females in our generation, when we're pregnant and we're giving birth, we sigh if we find out that it's a girl. So again, no one's taught us that we're doing that, but it's learnt behavior. So if I don't break the cycle at this stage, and actually when my daughter arrived, I celebrated her, then what's that teaching her? That's teaching her you celebrate your child regardless, male or female. So if I don't open my mouth and speak about that and teach that, how is the next generation supposed to know, and then the generation after that? And I think we now have a responsibility of what our parents and their parents and our forefathers have kind of handed down. It's our responsibility to break that now.
On that note, Raj, I had a question for you. You spoke about, you know, this is exactly what I'm very passionate about, intergenerational trauma. I've observed in my family, almost every person in our generation has it, right? When you look back in your life with your cousin who kind of touched you and abused you, do you think he might be having some kind of generational trauma instilled, or that male privilege which most men in our societies have? Now, look back, do you see any signs that he might have had any of those?
I think if you look at not just him, but all the men that took part in sexually abusing me, and that's cousins, not just one cousin, that's cousins as well as uncles and family members. I think what happens is there must be an unspoken thing between all of them, because I don't believe we can go through all of the years that we're going through and nobody know. And that's again, a responsibility, either back then growing up, those that knew, especially mothers or aunties or grandmothers, and even fathers and uncles. I think things got quietened down. The girls are at wrong. And the boys, even though they're the older ones, is there, don't do that again next time. But the girls are the ones that are getting beaten up. How could you let this happen? Don't talk about it again. And so, again, it's education, because it's happening, culture, generation after generation after generation. You put a whole group of male, females together, whether they're brother, sister, cousins, whoever, if you don't address the rights and wrongs, if these things aren't sex is never spoken about within our cultures openly. So if we don't talk about this is how you end up sexualizing a family member that you shouldn't, this is healthy, this is unhealthy, what happens is it becomes this dirty secret. And so you're silenced into this, both parties are silenced into this dirty secret, and the boys may continue on to the next family member and the next family member and the next family member, and you end up traumatized and damaged because of childhood abuse that actually was no healing and time for, okay, this happened and let's address that and let's heal you through the process. You feel dirty because it's been made to feel like a dirty secret, rather than that should never have happened to you. That's unacceptable. Nobody's having those conversations. And the women, unfortunately, that I mentor and I deal with, after 30, 40, 50 years of childhood trauma, are only now looking and saying, but that's how it was. That was normal back then. But the impact that it has on that individual growing up to then being married, to then having their own children, it's what triggers at certain points in your life that have a huge impact, and in some cases is debilitating.
I also think, right, this also leaves a very negative impression of sex on our minds. Like, as women, we kind of feel very shameful or hesitant to even talk about our own desires. Like, this is what I need, this is what I expect from you as a partner, because of the fact that our generations before us have instilled the fact that you don't talk about this as a woman, you're bringing shame. But the man can go around, going from one
doing whatever he
another.
wants.
Nobody winces an eyelid. But a woman, if she's sleeping with 10 men, I know I'm digressing, but coming back to the point that we are kind of instilled with that belief that sex is only for the men and sex is a bad thing, especially if you're a woman.
Yeah. And it's that bravado, isn't it? For men, it's that, oh, well done. And, we can celebrate that and have a shot and have all these different things and celebrate that. But again, it comes back to what are we being taught, and even down to the men. And I wouldn't put it just to the men, because in some cases it is the women that are abusive. So we have to look at what is our responsibility, and that's the thing that I always push. What can we do now to change things? Are we able to sit down and have those conversations with our family members now and say what should have been dealt with then wasn't, and we need to now deal with that? There has to be a level of responsibility, because you can't heal from something that you won't bring to the table.
Because you're trying to recover by yourself without other people's help.
And in fact, the other people were part of your trauma. And in some cases, it is having to have that conversation with them openly. And in some cases, you never may have that opportunity because they're no longer here, or you have no connection with them. But you still have to bring it to the table in order to go, okay, this is what I have in front of me. What's happened with it? And if I don't address the shame and the guilt and the blame, because we're taught that it's our fault, even though it wasn't. If I don't address all of those elements that causes my trauma, that causes triggers, that causes an impact, if I don't deal with all of those, if I don't look at all of those, then I'm never going to heal. What happens is it gets pushed back. And then when it triggers off, we learn to go, not today. And we push it back, or we have a couple of low days, and then we have to kind of coax ourselves back into it. A lot of us that are now married, have we had those conversations with our husbands? Have we told them what we went through? You know, so things that are happening within our marriage now aren't a result of me and my husband, for example. It will be a result of what happened back then as a child that I haven't addressed. Every now and again it flares up or it triggers off, and the full force of my impact is going to be on you, but actually it's not your fault. It's just that you don't know this dark, dirty secret that I've been carrying the whole of my life.
It reminds me of, I recently watched Luckiest Girl Alive on Netflix, and it's kind of what Mila Kunis went through in that movie. She got raped by someone in her school when she was like a teenager. And, you know, this movie is set 15 years down the track. She's an adult, she's engaged, about to get married. And she keeps having flashbacks of her childhood, and she lets out her anger on her fiance, who was not even a part of her life when all this trauma happened. But it's because she did not deal with that trauma when it happened, A, because the people that she tried to tell didn't believe her, and B, because she was just told, it's okay, don't bring it up, your life will get better. And so she was just told to keep it inside, but not do anything about it. And it just plays in her mind. And now 15 years later, it's playing out in, you know, arguments with her fiance, who is not the one to blame. It kind of reminds me of what you're telling me about here, because it doesn't get addressed properly. It just, you know, forget about it. Yeah. Can you also tell us a little bit about what your parents did to you and what type of abuse they put you through?
Again, growing up, it all started at the age of 5, and the reason it was 5 is my grandfather, my mum's dad, protected me up until that point. And unfortunately, he passed away at 5. And I have this saying that all hell broke loose in our home. And that's what it felt like. Everything that he protected me from, he's no longer there. So it's like a flood. So the physical abuse didn't start straight away. It was the verbal abuse. From there, it became physical, emotional, financial, and everything then progressed from that one point of my grandfather passing to now there's no obstruction and obstacle to really tell me how you feel. So unfortunately for me, it was a lifetime of what felt like a lifetime of growing up in a family that I knew I wasn't getting the love and the acceptance that I was seeing everybody else get, and was told and felt like that extra person in the family. You know, I'm the 4th out of 5. So 2 girls and 2 boys would have been brilliant. I should have been a boy. That would have been the 4 children. And even though I've got a younger brother than me, I felt like at that point there was no, okay, I'm all right here. And I think growing up, I always had this desire of being daddy's girl. Like I just wanted dad to love me, to accept me, to favor me. And growing up with that need and that want and feeling like I don't exist, other than like, okay, I'm just something on the bottom of your shoe. And growing up, that's how I felt. It was always a dismissed Raj, a Raj that doesn't exist unless it's been to be up and to say how much you hate me and all the rest of it. So I remember going through the whole of my school life and no one pick up what was happening. You know, there was a rule that you beat me neck down so that no bruises are visible when I'm at school. And again, parents didn't really do anything without uncles being involved. So it wasn't just an immediate parent thing. Everybody had to come in and take part in the abuse that was taking place. And going through school and seeing friends, and again, you know, you don't talk about anything. So wanting to share, does this happen in your home? But assuming it does, but when none of us are allowed to talk about it. And I think becoming of an age to go, Raj, you don't have to be here. Kill yourself. Because then at least you don't have to go through pain and suffering anymore. And I think the amount of attempts I made over the years, I'm grateful now. At the time, it was like, why won't that work? Why can't I kill myself? Then I deserve to be punished. God must hate me. And I think I started to get into that mindset of, okay, Raj, you've just got to do what we always have been taught to do. You grin and bear in this lifetime, and hopefully in the next life, you'll come back a better person. And so maybe your previous life, you were just really, really bad. So then you get to a point where you're going, why am I moaning and suffering in myself, when if I just deal with the fact this is your fault, then it'll get better. And I suppose that's how I reasoned it. And a lot of it, I didn't deal with reality very well. So every time I got beat, I would tell myself it was a dream or a bad nightmare, and it didn't really happen. And, you know, if your dad's telling you he hates you, I'm telling myself he said he loves me. And I'd cope with that, and I'd live with that. So I lived a life of denial for so long because I couldn't deal with truth. Truth's going to kill me. So therefore, let me hold hands with a make-believe. Let me hold hands with a lie, because I can survive in that. And I suppose that's what I did over the years.
Yeah, I guess it's a coping mechanism, right? Like you tell yourself whatever you have to just get through it. Yeah, which anyone that goes through trauma does that. You think of different coping mechanisms, and a lot of them are not healthy, but it's just whatever can get you through that traumatic experience.
But Raj, that was your coping mechanism. So now when you look back, do you justify yourself that I had to do what I have to do? So do you kind of excuse yourself? And what do you think right now? What are your thoughts when you go back into your past?
I think when I accepted truth, and again, it's bringing it to the table, I have to face it in order to accept it. I think when I started to, and that only happened through the process of writing the book. Because when I started to write the book, that was my first introduction to truth. And so I had to go through the trauma and the flashbacks and all of that, reliving every emotion, every hurt, every pain, to then look at it and go, that was never my fault. That was never my wrong. That was their wrong. And the things that were mine, I was able to look at and own and deal with and go, oh, I could have done that better, or I should have done that better. But all of that was a consequence of what was happening. So I would go out and stay out a little bit longer than I was supposed to. I'd say I'm going to a work event, and actually I was with my friend. So it'd be little lies like that to cope. However, when I looked at it and saw it at the table, I had to accept that's not yours. So therefore, forgive yourself for blaming yourself and move on from it. And I think through the seven years it took me to write that book, because there was times where I couldn't put pen to paper because I was so broken, to deal with one label and then the next and then the next, and to deal with the truth of that, because I never expressed or dealt with that emotion and that pain when it was happening, because I shut it all down and accepted the lie that I told myself to survive. So I have
two questions here, and this is something I ask all my guests who are kind of going through a similar journey. You, I, and Harita, we are sitting in places of privilege, right? These countries, they're very aware. We have laws in place to protect girls and boys who are suffering child abuse. But I want to reach out to the women who are not so privileged. Like, we speak to a lot of people from India and Pakistan, and we want to reach out to Afghanistan, but maybe in the future. What are we doing to raise more awareness to all the girls there? Because in some rural places in India, women don't even have any right over their lives. They have no control, no rights, controlled by their fathers, brothers, and husbands. What are we doing to ensure that we use this power of privilege and help those ladies who don't have that power?
That's a very good question. And I think I like to do things in stages, because if you can't deal with your immediate home, then how can you go out anywhere else? So if if you don't fix what's around you, then you can't then go and go, oh, but that's easier, let me go and do that. Because actually that's not. So for me, it's been about be that spokesperson, be that ambassador, be that person that as much as you're getting the death threats, because they come, because you're talking about things so openly and publicly, and how dare you, because what others will see is you're influencing the girls, but in a negative way. You're encouraging them to run away from home. No, we're not. We're just saying talk truth, so that that young girl, I don't have to see when they're 30, 40, 50 years old, or unfortunately, they're buried 6 foot under. So it's, for me, it's about what are we doing here locally initially? And from that, then everybody has a responsibility to go talk.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be in a public platform, but talk amongst each other. Eventually, the word will start to spread. Because if everybody just still deals with, oh, but it's too shameful and I can't talk about it. I mean, look how openly we've been able to speak today. But can many of, unfortunately, the women that are in this day and age, can they do that? Probably not. Because again, the obstacle. So if we don't equip everybody that we talk to and encourage them to talk to one more person, I think that's how you get the story across. Because growing up, as much as I was in a privileged upbringing and background, we didn't have TV and radio that we could listen to. So even if things had come up on news and the radio, we wouldn't have had access to that.
You don't know about it.
Everything was limited and controlled to what we could and couldn't watch and listen to. So again, as much as you're here, I never knew what abuse was. Because even when I left home and was put in a battered women's home, it was called a battered woman's home. And I remember looking at the police going, but I'm not a battered woman. But at that point, I'm black and blue. Faces out here, twice the size. But I still couldn't comprehend. So those ladies and young girls that have no TV, that have no radio, that have nothing, well, how do we reach them? Through us speaking up. Through us to say,
so many questions, but I am also mindful of the time. Before I wrap up, I have 2 important questions, I think. One is relating to your early marriage, but before that, I want to ask you, a lot of women, again, I'm coming from places where women are not privileged. A lot of women are forced to get married to their abusers, right? They get married to their rapist, abuse, and they get pregnant. They have a child and they cannot abort the pregnancy or whatever reason. How do we talk to them? Because that's like a huge truckload of trauma that they're bearing, and it's traumatic even for the child. How do we talk to those women? How do we approach that topic to that woman? And most importantly, how do we give them that strength that you're living with your own abuser? You need to get out of this relation. Because in South Asians, marriage is sacred, right? No matter he has raped me or whatever, he's still my husband. So what is the best way possible to change the narrative to these women to say, you got to go out for the sake of your child?
It's a tough one, because for everywhere else, it's easier for us here, because I can go to a women's refuge. I can encourage women to go there. I think for those that don't live it, it's easy to say, get up and get out.
Yeah.
But actually to get up and get out is going to cost you your life. It's like you shared at the very beginning, the statistics, 2 women are killed by a current or former partner. And that normally happens when they're about to leave.
Yep.
So if you look at the process, where's that girl going to go? Because if she goes back to her family, well, they've got shame to have to now deal with. Are they going to take her back? Are they going to join the husband's family and try and kill her? So again, the process in encouraging that young girl or young woman to get up with her child and leave, something that you again adjust your mind to, because you have to survive, right? You have to go, this is my life, this is my home now, I just have to make it work. And in some cases, they do that till their last breath. Why? Because now it's no longer about me, it's about my child. It's about the fact that I have no source of income, I have no form of transportation, I have nobody that's going to understand. And remember, if these ladies, women, young girls don't know of the support that's around within the community, because sometimes those places are hidden because they're meant to be. How would she know where she can go? And I put it back to myself when I left home the first time. I had no idea what support and help was out there. I didn't know the police can help, and it doesn't mean that they get arrested or this happens or that happens. I didn't know there were safe homes and places that I can go to, that it's going to be shelter for me, and that I don't have to worry about how I'm going to put food in my stomach. So can you imagine how they must feel? Actually, the concept of getting up. I became an orphan the minute I left home. It wasn't like I could talk to my favorite cousin or my siblings, or I had to cut off everybody. So all of a sudden, Raj is just Raj. No family, no identity, no nothing. I am now an orphan. That's what's going to happen with them. And it's hard because in that moment, they're cutting off now two sides of a family. They're cutting off the husband's side and potentially their own, because their own, are they going to accept them? No, probably not, because of where they are and all the backlash that's going to come on the parents too. And so it's building them up. If they don't know about support and help that's out there, then they see no lifeline.
Yeah.
So first we have to show them that, then encourage them. And that encouragement isn't a get up and get out now. It's a, okay, let's work towards this process.
Make a plan.
Here. Yeah, that's the destination we're going to, and this is how we do it.
Yeah, this whole thing just kind of brings me down to one thing, that women are still being treated as second-class citizens, or maybe third-class citizens, more so an object. But Raj, before we wrap up, we want to know about how you were forced to get married at 18, right? You didn't want to, but your parents attempted you to get married. How exactly does it feel like when you're forced to be in a room with a stranger, when you're forced to get married to someone you have no idea about? And I was also digging up some stats. In between 2001 to 18, around 15 million women reported abuse by their husbands in India. How dangerous is this whole situation exactly?
I have to say I was quite fortunate, because as much as they tried to get me married off at 18, I didn't go through with the wedding. Right. So I was grateful that as much as they were trying to get me married off to someone in India, his visa didn't come through. I remember praying so hard, God, if there's a God out there that lives, breathes, that can hear me, please don't let his visa come through. By that point, you're desperate. You're going to pray to anyone and anyone.
Anything.
And I was grateful at the time that somebody heard me.
Right.
Because as much as it felt like it was happening, all of a sudden his visa got declined. He wasn't able to come here. And then I got beaten by my uncle. And while he's smashing my head against the wall, telling me that they were going to now take me to India, that I'd have to marry him there and they were going to leave me there. And so within a month of them abusing me, I left home. And that was how I got away out of that first marriage. Second marriage, same thing happened. I came back home, they promised me the world, and that was extended family as well, my uncles. Nobody's going to touch me. Within the year, I was engaged to another guy, this time from England, and 3 months before my wedding, I was severely abused by two of my uncles and parents, and I left in the back of an ambulance. And that was 25 years ago. So I'm grateful that I didn't go through with it, and I couldn't go through with it. Whereas unfortunate for those that do, I couldn't even comprehend being in a room on your wedding night and knowing that you have to give yourself to somebody that you didn't even have a say-so about. Because in those two engagements that I had, there was no, do you want to marry this person?
I don't think, Raj, people in South Asia ask these questions. Are you happy? Do you want to become a mother? Do you want to become
a doesn't matter.
Implied, right?
Yeah.
Just thrown like I have a choice. I am pro-choice, right? So there are so many instances where I speak about it's my choice to become a mother. Many men have come up to me and said, it's your responsibility to become a mother. I said, no, it's not. It's not. So I don't think these questions are asked. But Raj, your story is awe-inspiring. and heart-wrenching at the same time. And when I hear you speak, you must be going through a lot of difficult time trying to kind of, get together, put your thoughts in one place. But what would be your message to anyone who's listening to you, any South Asian woman who might be going through a difficult time? What would be your message to them?
Speak up, and you will get the help and the support that you need. I think the biggest battle is that we feel like no one's going to believe us.
Yeah.
And you will be believed. And if I can do it, and 25 years later, be happily married, I've got my daughter, and I'm doing what I love to do, then it's possible for anybody. And you can't then put it down, oh, but that's different for you. No, all it takes is just opening our mouth.
Absolutely.
And opening our mouths to the right person. And I would encourage anyone, if you need to get in contact with any of us, I suppose we can all lead and direct any person into safety. And that's always the first step's always the hardest step. And I think once you do that initial, I've opened my mouth and spoke about it, then everything else, is as hard as it is, becomes that little bit easier because you've pushed past that first obstacle. So I would encourage anyone that's listening that knows someone that's going through something, encourage them to speak and let them be known that they're going to be believed.
Thanks, Raj.
Yeah. One thing I just want to know quickly before we finish out is, this abuse happened more than 20 years ago. So in that 20 years, have your parents or your family tried to reach out to you, or have any of them ever tried to apologize to you over the years? And has anything ever improved with them?
Yeah, initially the contact that was coming was death threats, and especially when they must have found out about the book. So I was constantly, there was quite a lot of that.
Because they're humiliated that it's all public now.
Yeah, even though everybody's names and person had been changed within the book, I think everybody that reads it that was part of my family would know exactly who I'm talking about. So for years, that was it. I was in essence in hiding, but not hiding because I don't care. So it was a bit of a crossroad that you're at. Okay, well, it's out there. I'm not going to hide, and I'm not going to apologize for it. I spoke my truth. Apart from a couple of years ago, my middle sister actually got in contact with me, and me and her were always close growing up, and so we've kind of reconnected that way. And through her, I've now connected back with my family, who have apologized, and it be sincere, and we're now for me, it was holding them accountable for what took place. And there's no, oh, we're not going to talk about this, or there's no zone. Like, if we're going to build, then you have to understand that I'm bringing everything to the table, before I let you meet my husband and my children. So for me, it was very much okay, let me deal with this first, see how you are. Do you take responsibility for yours? Not just blame those that are now no longer here, uncles, grandmother, etc. But are you going to stand up for what you did? And, they have. And that was a bit of a shock, because it's not the parents I remember growing up that were, especially dad, that would be prideful and will never say sorry. Now I feel like what I wanted back then I am now, which is daddy's girl. I think my siblings would laugh, but I am the favorite. And to get to that point of restoration, I suppose, of them healing as well as me healing. And even though I had forgiven them years ago, to be able to reconnect and see them change and be able to breathe, because they've carried that guilt and that shame themselves for how many years, and it not to the table. So I think when we had that initial connection and contact and bring everything to the table, was that, okay, you did this. Oh, and then to hear their side also of the influence and what took place with them, was good to know because it was in my head, it was the one perspective I had, which was mine. So to hear their truth also and come to it, okay, I can accept that, or no, that's an excuse. So yeah, so we're at a place now where we're 2 years in and building and taking slow steps, small steps. So yeah,
Raj, that is an amazing journey of, you know, a lot of hardship but positivity, and which speaks about a lot of inspiration. But to our listeners, basically those who heard us for the first time, this was Raj from UK. She spoke about her own abuse, various forms of abuse, her own trauma. We really hope that you've had a lot to take away from her inspiring journey. And as she mentioned, speak up and encourage other people to speak up as well. And to those of you who've been hearing us for a while, we really hope that you like what we put on the table as our content. If you've got any feedback or comments for us, please reach out to us at coconutchats@gmail.com. We are also available on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. Raj, thanks again for joining us. I know it must be the middle of a working day for you. This was amazing. Keep up the good work. And we need more women like you in our society, basically, just kind of be the beacon of our life. Thank you so much, Raj, and have a great day ahead.
So much. Thank you.
Thank you.